Hello, welcome to the program, The Issues with Topsy Gemba. The Issues is a program that comes to you on ASO television from Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, where we look into national issues and discuss them in the right perspective. The program provides that opportunity for us to invite personalities to be with us in the studio, where they help to provide more information on some of these issues that would be discussed. Today, this edition stands out to be alone in the sense that my guests, couldn't make it. But let me seize this opportunity to wish the ambassador, His Excellency, the ambassador of the Republic of Sudan to Nigeria, in the person of Mohammed Abdallah Harun, who's supposed to be with us in the studio this morning, but incidentally, he's under the weather, and he called and apologized his inability to be here this morning to talk with us on some number of issues between the bilateral relationships between Nigeria and Sudan. If he were to be here, he would have really thrown more light to some of these issues that we'll be discussing, but nothing is lost. All that we are really praying and hoping for him to recover very soon, and when that happens, he will join us anytime, since the program runs every day till Thursday. We pray that he gets that. Let me just seize that opportunity again to appreciate the effort made by the Chancery, the head of the Chancery of the Sudan, in the person of Abdul Salam, who constantly, put information over for me to know, basically concerning the arrival of His Excellency Mohammed. But due to the situation on ground, he's unable to make it. But of course, nothing is lost. I was intended to discuss with him, if he were to be here, looking at Nigeria and Sudan relations vis-a-vis the ECOWAS. When somebody talks about ECOWAS, you begin to understand or ask question, what is it all about? ECOWAS, simply the economic communities of West African states. It was put together by the former head of state, General Yakubu Gowon, in 1975. The intention behind this was to develop these African countries that are in sub-Sahara to live together as one, politically, economically, and socially in nearly everything, so that we treat ourselves like any other bloc we have in the world. Like, for instance, you talk about the European Union or the AU, or either the OIC. All these are blocks that countries come together among themselves to agree on common agenda that they're supposed to push forward. And so at that particular time, General Yakubu Gowon felt it was important for communities that are within these states to be able to come together and then identify themselves. The question is, what are those countries? Nigeria is one. We have Ghana, we have Togo, we have Liberia, we have Sierra Leone, we have Cape Verde, we have the Gambia. We have very many of them, of course, that they consider themselves to be the ECOWAS states. And these states, the intention here is is to develop those countries that are considered to be one in the West African region to behave as if they are like one country, meaning that a person who lives in Mali can now come to Nigeria without having to do with a passport for identification, or Nigeria to go to Mali without having to deal with a passport or identification. And then that will now help for the infrastructural development, like for instance, building roads, communication, and what have you, so that we now access those things easily. That was the intention behind that. And I think it was important. And I give credit to General Yakubu Gowon, who then was the head of state and ruled Nigeria for 9 years. And then he exited. And within the time frame that he ruled, he felt it was important for these countries so far mentioned, to act like one. The question here is, since the coming of these ECOWAS, has it in any way brought about economic development? That if the ambassador were to be here, he would have told us basically we would have been like one. But the question here is, France didn't want that, because France still controls some of the colonies they had before to still remain like the way they are, under their control, as a matter of fact. And so French government was like afraid if that currency were to be proposed and then becoming a legal tender, that would have affected, their own economy. And so they now instigated some of these Francophone countries, like either Togo, Sierra Leone, Mali, to now, including Burkina Faso, to now, they now instigated them to pull out from that initiative. And that actually affected that plan. But today, we cross these countries without having to do with the passport. The question here is, to what extent can you say this particular idea, the ECOWAS, Economic Communities of West Africa States, to what extent has that particular initiative brought about economic and political development in those countries? For instance, we understood to a very large extent at a point that Liberia or either Sierra Leone and even Sudan at a point had a civil disorder where people were fighting among themselves. And Nigeria had to come up with the initiative that was called then the ECOWAS. The ECOWAS was the use of the military in supporting the government as at that time to quell the insurgency that was happening in some of these states, Sierra Leone, Liberia, and even Sudan. The Darfur region was about to be carved out or thereabout, that the Khartoum government at that time had to go over that particular and then fighting the insurgents in that area. And leaving that country alone as at that time would have been possible for them to succeed. And for it to succeed, they needed some external assistance. And Nigeria was very much ready. I remember Nigeria sent so many soldiers, to go to Darfur to quell this insurgency. I don't know whether it's still going on today, but if the ambassador were to be here, His Excellency Mohammed Abdallah Haroun, if he were to be here, he would have explained further whether or not this issue is still on or it's over at the end of the day. The same thing it happened in Sierra Leone. The same thing it happened in Liberia. ECOWAS was all over the place. Then to fight against, people who wanted to take over government as at that time, that became like a civil war. Like Nigeria had its own, at a particular time, 1967, and then it ended in 1970. At that time, if the government had sought for any country to help, they would have done that. But again, ECOWAS didn't exist. ECOWAS didn't exist as at that time. It's only after the war had ended, or the civil war had ended in Nigeria, that Gowon felt it was important to come up with it and then establish it in May 1975. And since that time to where we are, we've been working together, these countries have been working together to develop themselves as one. The question here is, to what extent can you now say, looking at these countries today, Nigeria, for instance, has she ever received any assistance from these countries? Not talk about the Sahel states, where the military juntas simply took over power from a democratically elected government. In some of these countries like Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. And because they are now military, and because most of these ECOWAS states are completely democratic in nature, and that they decided to overturn government and took over the government and then formed what today we see as military government in those states, they felt they will not be welcome. But I remember at the point when that really happened, the president of Nigeria, in the person of President Bola Tinubu, immediately questioned the military juntas in those states, or to a point almost threatening them of being, removed if they, or discipline, let me say, discipline if they refuse to hand over power to those they took over from. But because the military juntas in those states, I'm talking about Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, had already prepared to do whatever they wanted to do, just like the way they are. They decided to say, to hell with ECOWAS. And then they broke away from the ECOWAS, removing themselves from ECOWAS, and then they established what they call themselves the Sahel states, where they are behaving like the way ECOWAS does to the member states. These states are now not members of the ECOWAS. But of course, diplomacy is still going on, talks are still going on to see how to get them back. And I believe at the point that will really happen. And this program, like I said, you can join us via call. You make a call to us and then tell us basically, have we as a country benefited, or are we benefiting today from what is called the ECOWAS, that is Economic Community of West African States? Is Nigeria benefiting, or at all any Africa or any country within that sub-region is actually benefiting? Of course, some of them have really benefited. But today, if you look at Nigeria, Nigeria is battling with high level of insecurity. High level of insecurity in the sense that even America had to come in to solving some of these challenges we are facing today. Some opinions are saying that we can equally seek, ECOWAS to come in to help. And I believe the military or the Ministry of Defense is in talks with some of these African countries, or these ECOWAS states, how best they can relate together to tackle insecurity. It is believed that some of these countries that they call themselves today ECOWAS, or economic community of West African states, they are linked together, like I said earlier. They are linked together in the sense that we travel without having to do with passports. And so if anything happens like the way today the country is battling with insecurity, the defense ministries of these states can actually step in and assist in wherever possible. That's the way it's supposed to be, that you cannot say we are benefiting from these alliance formed by the military in those days. This alliance is intended to create more development, to bring about, success required for a country to move on. And again, if you look at it, they're supposed to have this shared common understanding in terms of sending students to go and study either in any of these countries without having to do with any challenge or challenges. These are some of the benefits we're supposed to derive from it. Or either developing a road network that can connect Nigeria with either Benin Republic, with either Ghana, or either Niger Republic, or either Mali. That can really happen. Or to provide countries that are short of electricity, that can equally be made available for those countries. And so when a country runs into some of these challenges, like insecurity, for instance, you would expect, defense ministries of these states to come together, sit in a round table, and see how best this can be addressed. And I think that's the best way to go. But of course, if His Excellency were to be here, I'm talking about the ambassador of the Republic of Sudan to Nigeria were to be here. I'm talking about Ambassador Mohammed Abdallah Haruna. If he were to be here, he would have actually explained further what that would have meant for the growth of these countries we are talking about today. Like AU, for instance, AU, African Union. AU was one time called Organization African Union, that was changed more later to AU. It's all about Africa countries put together whether you are from West Africa, North Africa, Central Africa, or South Africa, these countries, they march together and they have a common front discussing issues that are relevant for the African development to ensure that nobody takes advantage over us economically or politically. Like the way the West is, that's Western Europe. It is believed that they're able to survive as a region because of what Africa has. These African countries, they are being managed sometimes as puppets for this Western world. And so it was important for African Union, that was called then, Organization African Union, to come together that the way they did, and then they'll be able to form a common front in tackling some of these challenges we have, either economic or political or social or agriculture. All these are factors that need to push a country forward, that you cannot say the citizens of those countries are not doing well. This is really what some of these blocs that are formed needed to do, or they are really doing, like in the case of ECOWAS, for instance. So these blocs are expected to come together and talk more about the challenges they have. I believe they have common challenge. Like for instance, agriculture. You know, some of the states, they hardly get rain as it is expected. And then rain areas like Nigeria, for instance, cannot supply food to some of these countries that are challenged by drought and whatever. Take for instance, countries like Mali, Niger, they are closely to the desert, and rain falls hardly from those countries. And what can they do is to look forward from those countries that rain falls constantly and agriculture thrives, so they can now seek for assistance where possible. That's one. And if, for instance, they don't have dams to generate electricity, Nigeria is one to do that. I don't think this, okay, let me see whether this call is for us. But of course, you can check the screen. The number is there. You call and make your contribution. If you look at the screen, if there's anything you want to make, by making a contribution, you pick there and contribute in the way you understand it. That's the way it's supposed to be. But like I was really saying before this call was cut short, I was just discussing how best some of these countries can help themselves. For instance, countries that do not have dams to generate electricity. Nigeria has a lot of water to do that. Is it talk about River Niger or River Benue that has formed a conference in Kogi State, where we have so much of it that sometimes cause a lot of destruction and lives lost as a result of that. If this water is well managed, it can generate electricity for countries that are battled with, desert or desert encroachment, for instance. And like I mentioned, like Mali, Niger Republic can be supported in any way possible with electricity. This is one. And when it comes to agriculture, these countries too are still being challenged in that aspect. They can equally be supported. And again, it creates exchange of trade in the sense that what we don't have, we can export it to those countries that they don't have such kind of those things we have as farm produce that can be sold either to Niger, either to Ghana, either to Togo or Sierra Leone or Liberia. The produce we have as agriculture can be supplied to them. And then that which we do not have can equally be given to us as a matter of fact. So it creates a very strong trade relationship among these countries that are called ECOWAS Community of West Africa States. This can actually help to a very large extent if that is sustained. Now, if you look at today's world, where technology stands to be the major factor of economic development, there are these countries that have developed to a certain level. They use technology in carrying out certain functions. It is important that we share some of these networks with countries that they don't really have enough power to generate such networks. And so Nigeria stands out as one of these countries in this country that are considered to be ECOWAS states, to ensure that it provides the technology to that extent to some of these countries in the sub-region. It is obviously true that indeed, if you look at Nigeria, Nigeria stands out to be one of these countries often being considered as a giant of Africa, not just in the Western region, but of course in the entire continent as Africa. And so Nigeria plays a very key major role to see how best some of these things that other lack can be provided for them, like the way we now supply assistance in terms of insurgency or civil war in some of these states, like the way we had it before in Liberia, in Sierra Leone, and even in Sudan, in the Darfur region. We saw the major contribution Nigeria made in that regard. And so it can equally happen in that regard when it comes to the deployment of technology to assist or to help other countries that are still lacking or lagging behind as a result of that. And I believe that can actually be done if that is actually continued. And so these are some of the things we have been talking about. But I decided to stay alone on this program this morning because we had earlier made arrangements with His Excellency, the Ambassador of the Republic of Sudan to Nigeria in the person of Mohammed Abdal Harun. But because he's under the weather, he couldn't make it, and the program just have to continue. And I decided it should continue. And so the things that we're supposed to have discussed with him are some of those things that you see me talking. But I believe by the time he gets well and then he finds time to be with us, we will now continue where we are likely to stop. But we shall go on a short break. When we return, we'll now discuss further. And when we come back, we'll draw the curtains in a short moment. So don't go away. This is ASO Television, DSTV channel 392. Stay tuned.
Nigeria as a free state in 20th century Africa is the need to revive the stature of man in Africa and restore the dignity of man in the world. Nigerians believe passionately in the fundamental human rights. We regard all races of the human family as equal. Under no circumstance shall we accept the idea that the black race is inferior to any other race. I appeal to all our leaders, far and near, to forget the wounds which were inflicted in cause of our internecine altercations. The love of our country should outweigh the love of our petty selves. The enjoyment of individual freedom under the law should mean more to us than our self-centered party programs and manifestos. Common dangers and common enemies alert us on the need for common security. Come and join Abubakar with me, Sadauna, Awolowo, Akitola, Ofarebe, Okpara, Ikoku, Aminu Kano, Ibrahim Imam, and Taka. Let us bind the nation's wound and let us heal the breaches of the past so that in forging our nation, there shall emerge on this continent a hate-free, fear-free, and greed-free people who shall be in the vanguard of a world task force whose assignment is not only to revive the stature of man in Africa, but to restore the dignity of man in the world.
Welcome back. Yes, still talking about ECOWAS. We are looking at the relevance of ECOWAS in economic and political development of member states. And we've talked a lot, and we're still talking really. What are we really benefiting being a member to ECOWAS states? And we looked at it in various dimensions. Politically, are we there? Economically, are we also there? Agriculturally, are we also there? These are the things that put together what we call a nation state. A nation state can only try to grow to become a recognized force in global issues only when it has institutions that are working very, very strong. And if the institutions are working very, very strong, and that means politically you will be heard, economically you will be heard. And nothing works if any of these two fails to work efficiently. And it is on that premise, and I guess my guess is correct, that brought about the formation of what today we call the Economic Community of West African states put together by General Yakubu Gowon then when he was a military head of state, because he felt these states cannot operate in isolation, because nobody lives alone. You can only exist by someone who lives very close to you. Then you share ideas and commune together that brings about development. And I think it was on that premise that these leaders felt it was important to come up with what today we call ECOWAS. Now, the intention behind was to address certain challenges that some of these states face, or they are even still facing. Whether or not we have succeeded, or are we succeeding in getting the best out of this formation, what is called ECOWAS? In terms of the economy, are we developing because we are together? In terms of politics, are we developed because we are politically together? These are some of the basic questions that most people will ask. And I had earlier put a line for you to call and make contribution on that. So that tell us whether Nigeria or any other country within the ECOWAS member states, is doing well as a result of coming together. I remember there was this time at the height of insecurity in this country. Some people were saying, suggesting that we should totally review the idea of this ECOWAS, where people cross to other countries unchecked. And I think if you look at it, that's another side of the argument, that it is true. In the time past when it was not there, for you to enter into another country, you need to have your passport, international passport, and the immigration will not check you to ensure that if you are coming in Nigeria to stay or to do a certain business, and then a particular period you will be given to, and if you don't, they will not chase you out of the country. That was how it was. Just like the way America is today, that immigration stands out to be one of the major policies of the present administration, making sure that nobody gets into America unchecked. Or if you are in America before the government will come on board like the way it is, they ensure you are checked properly, whether the papers you have are genuine or fake. That was what some people were proposing in this sub-Saharan region, saying that it's no longer beneficial, because those who are considered to be bad have access to these countries easily. For instance, in Nigeria, anybody from Chad can enter unchecked. For instance, in Nigeria, somebody from Niger can enter unchecked, or Mali, or Benin Republic, or Ghana, or Liberia, or Sierra Leone, wherever, or even Cape Verde, come in without being checked, because we are already one. So that idea began to rear its head, that we should review the constitution that brought about what today we call ECOWAS. The question here is whether or not it is correct. Are we not benefiting from the way we are, or we are now losing what we're supposed to have as a result of what is called ECOWAS? We do not know. But I think the founders of this particular regional bloc had the intention that it was going to be positive. It was going to scale development, going to bring about agricultural development, economic, and whatever in those countries. But again, because of the insatiable nature of a human being, today various interests have set in, and they're creating a very large disorder in those member states. But of course, I have the belief that as more of these discussions are really going on, we get to know basically what needs to be adopted or thrown out as a result of that. But on the whole, the economic community of West African states actually is doing a lot in keeping us together. And I think we can only strengthen by putting what is required to make it work. Of course, time is no longer on our side. We shall call it quit, believing that the little you received as a result of what the relevance stand for on the economic and political development of this regional bloc has in any way provided to a certain level required desire for the understanding on the principles of why it was set for. Again, we are going to draw the curtains to the program. The issues with Topsy Gimba, we shall be coming your way some other time with yet another package. My heart goes to the ambassador, His Excellency, the ambassador to the Republic of the ambassador of the Republic of Sudan to Nigeria in the person of Ambassador Muhammad Abdallah Harun. We are praying for you to get recovered as quickly as possible so that you have time to join us and tell us more about what you understand about some of these issues we've tried to discuss this morning on this program, the issues with Topsy Gimba. See you and do have a lovely time, and bye-bye.